Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. To get our shout out, watch to the end of our videos to answer our questions correctly. And to all our returning fans, we appreciate you greatly. Keep watching and sharing, and please remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you will be notified when our next video pops. Thanks a bunch. Now to today's video. Once upon a time in a quiet town where the sun bathed the streets in warm golden hues, there lived a boy named Bayer. His laughter often echoed in the air, pure and bright. Yet beneath that laughter lay an unspoken loneliness. You see, Bayer was only 7, but life had already taught him that companionship could be as fleeting as a butterfly's kiss. I am Diana, Bayer's mother, and my heart swelled with pride as I watched my son grow. But the world was not as kind as I had hoped. As a single mother, I worked long hours at the local market to provide for Bayer. The evening stretched on, and while I toiled away, he found solace next door with Auntie Sabrina, a woman whose charm could light up the darkest of rooms. Auntie Sabrina was warm, with a generous laugh that wrapped around Bayer like a cozy blanket. Her home smelled of freshly baked cookies and spiced tea, a perfect retreat for my little boy after a long day at school. I often heard his laughter spilling over the fence, and it filled my heart with gratitude, knowing he had someone to care for him while I was away. But as time passed, I noticed a change. Bayer, once vibrant and full of stories, became quieter, retreating into himself like a flower closing at dusk. I brushed off my concerns, thinking it was just a phase. After all, children had their ups and downs. But the knot in my stomach tightened when I learned from neighbors that Auntie Sabrina had introduced Bayer to a special game. What kind of game? The question echoed in my mind, a riddle wrapped in a mystery. I began to watch closely, my instinct screaming that something was off. I decided to confront Bayer one evening when I found him sitting on the porch, staring at the ground, his little fingers picking at the wooden slats. Bayer, I said softly, kneeling beside him. What's wrong, my love? He looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. Nothing, Mama, he replied, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice, the tremor that spoke volumes. Are you sure? You can tell me anything, I urged, my heart racing. He sighed deeply, as if the very air around him was heavy with secrets. Auntie Sabrina, she plays a game with me. It's fun, but sometimes it makes me feel funny. A chill ran down my spine. I took a breath, trying to keep my voice steady. What kind of game, Bayer? He shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting away. I don't know how to explain it. It's just different. The simple word different echoed in my mind like a warning bell. The maternal instinct within me roared to life, determined to protect my son from whatever shadows lurked in Auntie Sabrina's cheerful demeanor. The next day, I made a plan. I would visit Auntie Sabrina, under the pretense of sharing tea and catching up. As I approached her front door, my heart raced, fueled by a mix of anxiety and resolve. She opened the door, her smile as bright as ever, welcoming me into her home. Diana, how lovely to see you, she beamed, gesturing for me to sit. I took in the warm ambience of her living room. The walls adorned with photographs of her travels and a bookshelf lined with colorful novels. Auntie Sabrina, I began, my voice steady. I wanted to talk about Bayer. He seems a little different lately. She chuckled lightly, her eyes twinkling. Oh, children are such sensitive beings. They go through phases, you know. I nodded, trying to keep my composure. Yes, but he mentioned a game you play together. I just want to make sure he's okay. Her laughter rang out again, but this time it felt hollow. Oh, Diana, it's all in good fun. We're just playing make-believe. Kids love that, don't they? Make-believe. My instincts flared. What kind of make-believe, Sabrina? Her smile faltered for a moment, the air growing tense. You know, the usual: pirates, treasure hunts, just games that spark imagination. I sensed the light coiling around her words like a serpent. I want to ensure Bayer feels safe and happy. It's important to me. Of course. He's a wonderful boy, and I adore him, she replied, the sweetness in her voice sharp with an edge of something sinister. But sometimes children need to learn about boundaries, don't you think? My breath caught in my throat. The way she said boundaries was laced with a foreboding that made my blood flow slow down a bit. I'll never forget that fateful evening when my son Bayer's world crumbled, taking mine down with it. It started with a phone call from his teacher, Mrs. Temple, asking me to come to the school the next day. Her tone was laced with a mix of concern and hesitation, leaving me on edge. My mind was racing with worst-case scenarios as I lay in bed that night, barely able to sleep. The next morning, I arrived at the school, my heart heavy with anticipation. As I entered Mrs. Temple's office, I saw Bayer sitting in the corner, his eyes cast down. He looked different, his usual sparkle missing. Mrs. Temple greeted me warmly and motioned for me to take a seat. Diana, I wanted to talk to you about Bayer, she began, her voice soft but serious. Have you noticed any changes in his behavior lately? I thought back to the past few weeks. Bayer had been quieter than usual, but I had attributed it to the stress of school. Not really, I replied, just the usual ups and downs of being a teenager. Mrs. Temple leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. I've noticed some disturbing changes, Diana. Bayer's grades have slipped, and he seems withdrawn. But it's not just that. He's been wetting his bed at night. My heart sank. This wasn't my Bayer. Something was wrong. What's going on, Mrs. Temple? What's happening to my sons? She took a deep breath before continuing. Bayer confided in me yesterday. He told me about Auntie Sabrina, my sister, my trusted sister. A wave of denial washed over me. But Mrs. Temple's next words shattered that illusion. Bayer said that Auntie Sabrina has been inappropriately touching him. He's been struggling to cope with the emotions, Diana. He's scared, and he doesn't know how to make it stop. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My world was spinning out of control. My sister? How could she? I thought back to all the times I'd left Bayer in her care, trusting her with my precious child. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake the truth out of her. But then I saw Bayer, my beautiful, broken son. He needed me now more than ever. I composed myself, trying to think clearly. What do we do now? I asked Mrs. Temple, my voice shaking. We'll need to report this to the authorities, she replied firmly. And we'll get Bayer the counseling he needs. But for now, let's just focus on supporting him, okay? I nodded, still trying to process the news. As we left the office, I wrapped my arms around Bayer, holding him close. I'm so sorry, baby, I whispered. I'm here for you. We'll get through this together. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, court appearances, and counseling sessions. Auntie Sabrina was arrested and charged with child abuse. My family rallied around us, providing the love and support we needed. But the journey to healing was far from easy. Bayer struggled to articulate his emotions, and I struggled to understand the depth of his pain. There were times when I felt like I was losing him, like he was slipping away from me. But with each passing day, with each counseling session, I saw him slowly begin to heal. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, Bayer turned to me and said, "Mom, I'm sorry." I looked at him, confused. "What are you sorry for, baby?" "For not telling you sooner," he replied, his eyes welling up with tears. "I was scared, Mom. I didn't know what to do." I pulled him close, holding him tight. "You don't have to apologize for anything, Bayer. You did nothing wrong. It's not your fault." As I looked into his eyes, I saw a glimmer of the old Bayer, the one who had been lost for so long. I knew that we still had a long way to go, but in that moment, I felt a sense of hope. We would get through this together. We would heal together. But as I look back on those fateful days, I realized that the journey to healing wasn't just about Bayer. It was about me too. It was about confronting my own demons, my own failures as a mother. It was about learning to let go of the guilt and the shame and embracing the truth. And the truth was, I had failed my son. I had trusted the wrong person, and it had almost cost me everything. And most importantly, in a mad craving to work so many jobs and raise a lot of money to sort bills, I had been absent from my son's life. I had to go back to the drawing board and choose my son over every material need. I restructured my time at the offices where I worked so that I can have enough time to be in the life of my son, lest another Sabrina happens to us. Bayer and I, our journey to healing was not easy. I wish I could say it was. He still wet the bed for over 2 years, and it bothered me. I was almost going to accept that it won't ever stop. It eventually did on the 13th of April, 2025, he stopped wetting the bed. Did I tell you that after conducting some medical checks, we noticed that Sabrina had infected my son with hepatitis B, and when we saw some sores at both ends of his lips, we went back for another test, and the result proved that he was also down with herpes. Crazy times it was. My savings suffered. My time suffered. My son suffered severely, all because of my negligence. I would not wish this on anyone. This was why I had to send in my story for other parents, especially single moms who are extremely busy, to learn from my mistakes and avoid falling into these pitfalls. Thank you for watching to the end of this story. Do well to subscribe and click on the bell icon. This will help YouTube notify you when our next video gets uploaded. Where are you watching us from? Who is your favorite character? Guess what? You can share your forbidden confessions with us via email or WhatsApp, and we would most likely have it featured. Send it as a document via email to forbiddeneroticconfessions@gmail.com or as a voice note via WhatsApp to +44 741 831 6330. Again, it is +44 741 831 6330. I will see you again in the next video. Until then, stay sensual.